We are live.
We are. Hey, folks, it's been a minute.
It has. It's been going on 2 months for you now.
It has. And it was a much needed vacation, much needed break.
Which is good. I'm really glad you got that break.
Yeah,
Before we
God, if I
jump
did
in
listen.
too far, do you want to tackle the prayer?
Yep.
Cool.
Hail, hail, hail. Othin and Loki, blood brothers, con artists, silver-tongued and smiling, truth teller, world breaker, Yolfather, Woski, net weaver, blessed ones. You who've shown us the many paths, you who've shown us the many ways forward, behind, beyond, and between. Holy ones who fill your goblets daily with song and story. Holy ones who teach us to speak and to say. Holy ones who bring the braggerful. Holy ones who stay in the sumble, swapping sagas. You, O holy and blessed ones, and your families, you show us beauty, bounty, and blessings. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for bestowing us your brews, for bringing us brightness and bitter. Thank you for carrying us. Thank you for crafting with us. Thank you for creating with us. O holy ones, festual. Damn, that is a really good stout.
Which one did you pick up?
So, one of my partners actually had me pick this up. This is a Kalamazoo Stout.
It's good.
Never had it before tonight, and I looked at the brewed with brewer's licorice and went, that sounds gross. And I actually kind of like it.
Yeah, it's not very anisey for something brewed with licorice. I think it's really good. Also, hi everyone. We've got Melkor, Emily, Jason, and I'm gonna butcher that pronunciation, and I'm sorry. Ramut Al
Tayyiba,
aka Gina Kitts.
welcome.
And welcome back, Sarenth. Did you happen to watch the last episode of me?
I have not.
I didn't figure you did. But yeah, the last episode was fun. We got raided by Russian bots. So that was interesting. Not many, like it wasn't like a full raid. It was just like a couple of random bots showed up in the chat typing stuff in Cyrillic. So that was fun.
That's amazing. The Russians have invaded us.
Right, no kidding. I did on air. I did Spirit-Led Spirits, so that was fun because I hadn't done that before, and it was just me, so it was like, well, might as well. And yeah, we just kind of shot the shit, and I got Melkor to talk a bunch about, even though she was just in the, or they were just in the chat. Got them to talk a bunch about Baba Yaga, which was fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Speaking of Melkor, good to see you, Sarenth. Glad you're feeling better. I am too. I'm not 100% there. I am still technically on vacation until March. But I am doing so much better than what I was because I caught COVID just as we were going to move into the house. For those of you that are watching instead of just listening, I'm actually sitting in my basement, I think, for the first time on an episode.
I think so, yeah.
And so, for those of you who are subscribers to the AGF Patreon, you've already seen this, but this is the new basement. I hope it's not too echoey because I put up my that green screen that used to feature in the episodes. It's now serving as my sound barrier.
It sounds better than the last couple of AGF episodes, honestly. So
that's good. And so the move-in got delayed by about 2 weeks because all of us, except for somehow my mom, caught COVID. All 7 of us, 7 out of the 8 people in the house. So we then, once we got out of COVID, moved in. And so the last couple of weeks have been just getting stuff unpacked, getting things arranged. It's still not quite there, but oof.
Yeah. Hey, you're making progress, and I'm honestly really proud of you. Getting that done is a big fucking step. Like
it really is, and I am just so happy. And I'm glad to hear that it sounds better than what it did.
Yeah.
My plan for the long term is to actually get sound proofing up around the basement.
That'd be neat. Make yourself a little studio.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool. All right. Before I forget, I do want to say what I made in the drink this time.
Yes, please do.
So it's a take on a pink lady, which I saw from a TikToker that I follow. This is basically about a quarter of an ounce. It's a take on a pink lady. This is like not a classic pink lady, but whatever. It's about a quarter ounce of agave syrup, 2 ounces of pomegranate juice, a little over a little over an ounce of a delightful limoncello that a coworker made for me, 4 ounces of gin, and about a half ounce of lime juice. Sorry, I had to actually check because I forget things.
All good.
And it's actually genuinely delightful. You get all of the flavors in a really good balance. It's tart but sweet and herby and just really good from the gin.
Excellent. I would love to try it sometime.
Absolutely. I've also figured out I don't think I can now make a cocktail that's not at least partially spirit led, because like as soon as I touch the bottles, they're talking to me. Like it's like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna listen.
It sounds like you.
Yeah, I mean, even if I know what I'm doing more or less ahead of time, like I did today, it was like, y'all tell me when to stop because you know better than me. So, yeah. And yes, homemade limoncello is in fact the best.
What I can't wait for y'all to try. Speaking of homemade being the best.
Oh no, what is this?
This. See how dark the bottom is?
Mm-hmm.
That is cocoa nib mead.
Ooh, that's gonna be fun. Cocoa nibs are really fun to brew with. The
last time that I made this, it tasted like a sweet chocolate.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah.
So that actually brings us to our next episode, where we're going to have you out here.
Indeed.
Do this in the living room.
Excuse me. That'll be really fun. I'm excited. I mean, you've been out here. Makes sense for me to do an episode or two out there. So
yeah,
at the new place, that'll be fun. So yeah. That sounds like a group episode, so y'all can share it. Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. And we'll see if we can't coax Emily onto the show for at least a couple minutes. We'll see how that goes. Depending how that goes.
We have cocoa nib mead.
Right. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that next episode. What was the other thing? Oh, also, since we're just, word vomiting.
This is a catch-up episode, yeah.
Yeah, since we're just word vomiting all the things that we're planning right now. The other day, which I think there was actually 2 weeks ago, but that's not the point. The other day while I was watching Miss Vivi's stream, uh, I got struck by this idea for a really fun episode that I want to do. So we're going to try to have Miss Vivi, probably Caitlin on. That I've floated this to her yet, but if you're watching, Caitlin, hi. But we're planning on having a storytelling special episode up soon. I'm not sure if it's going to be an on the normal schedule episode or not yet. We don't really have the details planned out, but the idea is basically a live ritual where we tell stories and drink and share stories and drinks together as the episode, and as the ritual. And the idea is stories influence life as much as life influences stories, and we're going to tell stories that are true enough.
They may have happened in this world, maybe a different world, maybe something between.
Yeah. Stories with embellishments or not embellishments, who knows?
Oh, no. They're all going to be true stories.
Yeah. True.
True stories.
In the mythical sense.
In the mythical sense. Maybe not strictly factual, but,
True. What's the quote from V for Vendetta? Writers use lies to tell the truth.
Artists,
like yeah.
And words give us the means to meaning.
Exactly. It's a really fun idea. It's going to be a really fun ritual, I'm absolutely sure. We're going to put warnings up beforehand, like at the very beginning of the episode, because watching the episode is partaking in the ritual.
Yep.
And informed consent, all of that.
I've definitely turned on to this idea a lot more since reading Sandtalk by oh damn it! Now my brain is gonna dump the name out. I ran into this author with regards to Rune Hjarno Rasmussen, and he introduced me to the concept of yarning through Sandtalk, and it's going to bug the shit out of me, so I'm just going to look it up. His name is Tyson Yunkaporta. There we go. And excellent book. I've read it all the way through. There's a lot that we can learn and integrate into our milieu in terms of the overculture, as well as just being heathens and polytheists. And yarning is kind of a no confrontation way of bringing meaning and understanding to a thing. It can also involve a lot of storytelling, and it's just a really cool concept. And I love this.
Check that book out. Yes. Also,
the only difference between a storyteller and a bullshit is how many people listen. Yes,
pretty much. I'm definitely gonna have to check that book out. I've got several books that are on my to read list, but we'll get through them eventually. But yeah, the thing that really struck me as I was watching this stream, because the Miss Vivi was streaming a game that's all about storytelling and the power of stories. It's technically a horror game, and I don't remember the name of the game. I'll ask her for it and post it at some point. But the game was really about like the way that stories affect reality, and like how settings often that authors use are intentionally every place and no place. And that really struck me as important mythically, because you get ideas in folk tales, and especially like the analysis of folk tales in literary circles about things like the woods TM. All stories take place in the woods. What is the woods? It's the place where stories take place.
It's outside.
It's outside, right? It's the place where you aren't. It's the other side. It's just the other side of the hill where the story can take place.
It's Utgarth.
Right. But really, like that's very much kind of the idea. Is it's just the other side of the hill, just out of sight.
Yep.
And the idea for this ritual, at least, is to bring that place here so that it can do its work here for a little bit of time.
Excellent.
Which is fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this. I really am. And my hope is we can do it in a time where it's the heat and the cold are a little more balanced.
You mean where it's not, fucking -1 at night or something like that? That'll be probably not March, maybe April. We'll see, because I've still got to nail down some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure the various guests that we're hoping to have on are gonna be okay with it, and then scheduling and everything else. But we'll figure it out. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
But in the meantime, what have you been up to? What have the projects you've been working on? What has Maleck been up to?
What have I been up to? Okay. So in the sum up of 2021, I finished 2 intensive periods of spirit work where I was doing stuff every single day, first for the ancestors and then for the land spirits for pack magic. That was incredibly intense, and just a lot of fucking work. That literally culminated on New Year's. So that was a lot of fucking work. I'm really glad it's done, but I am also really glad that I did it, because I learned so fucking much. Not one, but 2 new people have finished their initiations into pack magic in the last month, which is also really intense, including one person who is actually, that initiation is the reason why the episode is late this month, because I was on February 1st. I was up all night with the fire because it was a fire vigil initiation. I got to nap at least, but they didn't. Anyway, that's beside the point. So I've been doing that. I have a new job. I talked about last episode, but yeah, in the span of about 6 months, I hopped jobs 4 times, which was good and important. And it was very much a case of, wow, this is extremely spirit-led, because people don't hop jobs this easily, and also things lined up way too well, whereas like, well, I got this job, and I learned all the skills I needed for the second job, which taught me all the skills that I needed for the third job, and I wouldn't have gotten the third job, which is great, without the preceding 2, but, here we are. Shan! Hey, Shan!
Hey, Shan!
But yeah, so that was intense, and I'm still kind of settling in. I've been at the new job for about a month now. A little over a month. That's been fun. My condo in South Carolina sold.
Yay!
On the 31st of January, which is awesome, because we've been more or less trying to unload that for 2 years now. The pack, it grows. Indeed, it does. And the thing
one of y'all,
right? Okay. The thing about pack magic is that it's a lot like an avalanche. It takes a second to get moving, but when it does, it goes just all at once. And it's like, oh, cool, you're interested. I sure hope you're ready for what's coming, because if you show too much interest and they show interest in you, it sure is coming. But yeah, it's been not as busy as yours, but it's been a busy few months for me.
I don't know the stuff that you've been up to. I mean, if I've been continuing the spirit work that I had been previous to taking time off in October, yeah, but you have definitely been busy yourself. It's not a race.
It's not a race. And I'm not trying to make it one, but it has been a lot, and I am theoretically entering a period of rest, or at least not like assigned work where I can kind of do what I want to do for a while. Oh yeah. So also, I take a small bit of pride with your house selling, so that's a fun story. So Jason is over at my apartment showing me showing me luck magic stuff. And literally, the minute that I make contact with luck in the journey is the minute that I get the notification that we got an offer on the house. I was like, okay, cool, thanks.
This is very true.
That's fair. Equally busy, just in different areas. Yeah, that's fair, Emily. I don't discount my own work all the time. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Speaking of luck, that's a surefire way to kill it by constantly saying you don't have it.
That's true. That's true. I feel like Jason can claim a small bit of pride in a lot of people's things. Yeah, he honestly can. Like that's part of what he talked about on the show, as being an agent of luck. You influence things. That's how that happens. And like I stopped believing in coincidence a long time ago. But yeah, when it lines up like that, it's like, okay, I got it. Thanks. But yeah, so that's been fun. Also, in terms of luck, we had to do almost nothing to get the house sold. Like, it was basically just everything worked. And like, even though like minor repairs that we had to do to get the house sold total less than $3,000, which is a lot.
That's nuts.
Yeah, that's less than half of what I was expecting it to cost to get the house repaired to be in sellable shape. So, yeah, no, it was really good. Oh, and not February, January 25th. Oh goodness, this is wonderful. Hail Jason, the provider of luck interactions and delicious soda bread. None of that was a lie.
January 25th.
Thank you. January 25th was my 1 year and 1 day anniversary with Angrabotha, since she showed up in my life. It's one of those pack magic as an avalanche things where that kind of went off very suddenly when it did. And we're looking to make the God Spouse thing official here sometime in the next year, approximately. We don't have anything nailed down yet, but that's a thing that's coming, and it's mildly scary, but mostly exciting, and I'm really happy about it. And I think this is actually the first time I've talked about it like publicly. So,
So, since it's the first time that you're talking about it publicly, what is God Spousing? Is that just some crazy thing that Tumblr kids do?
Yeah, totally. No, actually, the ring the bells indeed. That's huge and awesome. You, Maleck, have done so much spirit work though, so you have so much oomph behind you anyway. I mean, that's fair, and like, magic doesn't fix things on its own. You still have to do the work, but there's definitely a sense of, if you get going in the right direction and you've got the gods behind you, things tend to work out okay. You might not get rich, but you'll have enough. God spousing. So God spousing, to draw an equivalency, not an equivalency, a rough comparison that most people will be familiar with. In Christianity, nuns, especially like Catholicism, nuns are effectively God spouses, right? They take intense vows, usually including celibacy, especially in Catholicism, including celibacy. And nuns in particular were known, or are believed still are known as brides of Christ. And that's kind of the idea, is it's every God spouse relationship is different because every relationship is different. I'm not speaking for everyone, but broadly speaking, it's an intense relationship that usually includes romantic and or sexual overtones between a god.
Fuck the overtones. Sometimes it's not overtones.
Yeah, sometimes it's not overtones. Most of the time, it's just activity, at least in my understanding. Between a god and a devotee. And this can look a lot of ways. Sometimes it can look very, very similar to what we might think of as like a human marriage, and sometimes it might be much more like monastic work, right? More like being a monk. It can include extremely intense taboos and requirements, or it might include very little. In my particular case, the requirements are particularly light. The relationship is relatively casual as far as official requirements, but obviously there's a lot of emotional connection. These can be temporary or permanent arrangements. I know several God spouses, one of whom I know is a lifelong commitment. They're in it for good. They're in it till they're in the ground. I know some others who are much more temporary. They renew them every so often, and it's whenever one or both parties decide to call it quits, that's it. In my particular case, it's been made very, very clear that it's as long as we're both happy, great. And if one of us is unhappy, we can talk about it. And if we're both say it's time to go, then it's time to go. Also, past life shit is weird. But this isn't apparently our first go round by a long shot. So, that happens too.
I think it's worth pointing out that there are as many ways to have these relationships as there are people.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these may or may not contain romantic entanglements because the person themselves might be ace. They may or may not have gender components because the person may be non-binary, cis, etc., trans. It may or may not have certain components of sex, sexuality, gender, the whole milieu of human experience and extra human experience, which, for a brief show on a show ostensibly about drinking, we're not going to be able to do justice to. And even in AGF, when we've had God spouses on, we're really scratching the surface. Suffice to say, all we're giving at this point is boilerplate and some of our own explorations of the concept. Folks, seriously, if you think you're being tapped for this, the best thing you could probably do for yourself is get outside divination from at least 3 sources and be damn good and sure that you're doing your due diligence. I heavily recommend Jim Stovall's book on the matter of spiritual accounting. You can find that PDF through his website, which, of course, I don't remember right now.
Naturally.
But if you look up Jim Two Snakes Stovall, you will find his website. And I definitely recommend reading that PDF and living by it because it has saved so many people's asses by following the 3-legged stool model of verifying your experiences. And what I mean by verify isn't having to line up the lore and go, okay, does this match? And that's part of it. That's one of the 3 legs of the stool, but that's not the whole of it. And sometimes you simply don't have a roadmap in the lore for things. You just don't.
Mm-hmm.
And this is honestly one of those areas that we don't have a lot because so much of the stuff that we have that was left to us came through Snorri Sturluson and other late sources, such as Saxo Grammaticus's work, Venerable Bede, etc.
Yep.
Yes.
Because there are plenty of things that are not gods that want to F you over. Yeah, no, Josie, you're completely right there.
And
put in Jim, it's jim2snakes.net. Jim2snakes.net is Jim's website where you can find that. He's also got a new PDF out about ancestor work and how to do that.
Or a way to do that.
which is also very good. Jim just does good work, like just in general.
I love how he says, I'm not a writer, and then produces more PDFs than I do.
Right, no kidding. I'm still working on like one PDF, and he's got two, probably working on a third out. I'm just like, all right, fine.
I wish this in particular, I'm going to point this out. I wish this was talked about more often, because as often as God spouses come up as a concept, what we have actually evidence in the lore for are people having relationships with different kinds of spirits. And whether or not it's in the lore is kind of beside the point. But like people that are shitting themselves over the God spouses concept really actually need to read their shit, because men marrying Valkyries wasn't an unknown thing in the lore. All kinds of supernatural creatures. Selkies also come to mind, especially Selkies. Alongside the Valkyrie thing, the Swan Maidens.
And that's the thing. You see this in lore where the living traditions are better preserved. You see actually a lot of examples of this in Tengrism, which is Mongolian and Siberian lore roughly. You see actually a lot of examples of this. They probably wouldn't use the word God, because that's not the concept is a hard translation, but they would probably use the word spirit. Spirit spouses
maybe
pop up
big
a lot there.
Spirit.
Being
a Tenger is kind of like being a really big, powerful spirit.
Yeah,
it's roughly equivalent to our conception of God, but it doesn't quite translate.
Yeah.
Assuming that words are hard.
Yeah, right? And that's assuming that you're talking about like a general neo-pagan idea of God,
as opposed to a polytheist conception, which can vary in size and influence.
Yeah, and I'm like specifically excluding Neoplatonist ideas, because Neoplatonist ideas of deity tend to be more perfect and higher, and would generally preclude things like God spousery or most
that
of what
makes my teeth itch.
I know. One of my things is I will absolutely die on a hill defending someone's right to do what they want. Neoplatonism is perfectly valid. That's fine. I also fucking hate it. As soon as I will die on the hill fighting for a Neoplatonist, I will then turn around and tell the Neoplatonist to fuck off because I can't stand it. But, that's neither here nor there.
Well, to be fair, though, also Neoplatonism, as opposed to Platonism, which is a different animal entire, Neoplatonism often is a gateway to monotheism because of how Neoplatonism started historically anyway.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Yeah. And the whole thing with the monad and the whole it's complicated, and frankly I don't want to get into it. Ooh. Enjoy that. In the meantime, I'm going to post this real quick. Emily says God spousing and spirit spousing does have a history, but also it's not an inherently better or closer relationship one can have with the spirit, just one of the possibilities.
Yes,
that's very important, and something I wanted to bring up. Being a God spouse doesn't make you a better authority on the God or spirit in question. It's your relationship, not anyone else's relationship, and it really only applies to you. UPG is just that, personal. The other thing I wanted to get back to with what Josie said earlier, which I'm going to highlight real quick, just once again, there are plenty of things that are not gods that want to fuck you over. That's very true, and that's one of the reasons why we push discernment so hard here. I've also seen this shit go south really hard, where it was, in one particular case that I'm thinking of, it was someone who was absolutely convinced that they were having sex with a god. It sure as shit wasn't a god, but they thought it was. And they asked me for advice, and I gave them a reading and the whole thing. And that sure as shit was not a god. They wouldn't listen to me, but it sure as shit was something pretending to be a god that wasn't. Yep. And
especially if you're new, even if you're old hat, just do your due diligence. And your due diligence is to verify with other people in the community that you trust, to give you no bullshit.
Yeah.
just real quick, since I decided to get this all over me, this is Backwards Bastard.
Ooh, I love Backwoods Bastard. It's so good.
I like it too, but more when it's in my mouth as opposed to all over me.
But it's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
This is why we do discernment.
Yeah, that's why you do discernment, because it's important. Because as much as the human world is full of people who want to take advantage of those that they can, the spirit world's not much different, frankly.
Honestly, in some ways, it is way easier to be a grifter.
Emily says, OnlyFans pixelators, just saying. It's fine.
Anyway,
it
is in some ways way easier to be a grifter in the spirit world than it is in the physical, especially if you don't come from a culture where you're prepped to, say, challenge a spirit on whether or not it's real. If you come from a background where, it's rude to insist that the spirit undergo a test in order to prove it is what it is, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a lot of spirits that are going to be like, we got a mark, folks.
Right.
Especially if you have any innate psychic ability, spiritual ability, or if you're just really interested in studying stuff, that can really light off some beacons. I know that I'm very grateful that although my elders at the time were abusive pricks, when I was doing evocation work, they insisted I do a lot of prep work before I picked up any of the tools for it, because once you do evocation work, a lot of stuff starts going, what's that? Yeah. So certain magical disciplines in some ways will invite or entice spirits to come your way. And it's far better to do all the prep work ahead of time and make sure that you've got a solid grounding, especially a solid grounding in theology. If you've just converted to being a pagan or a polytheist or what have you, be really careful about just jumping in right off the cuff with whatever happens to pop up in your experience.
Absolutely. Melkor says, I've always lived by, when you start noticing the weird starts noticing you. No, that's a thing, right? Because spirits are like, oh, you're paying attention. It's like when you're talking to someone, if they don't react at all, you're not going to talk to them. But if you talk to someone and they talk back to you, suddenly you can have a conversation.
Also, just because a deity is interested in a certain type of relationship doesn't mean you must say yes to them. If indeed you verify that what you're talking to is a god, you still don't have to accept, because you still have personal sovereignty.
Yep. That's a thing that really can't be emphasized enough.
Especially if you're coming out of a religion where authority is really baked into the cake. Which is honestly most people that are growing up in Western countries. The notion of saying no to a god can be really intimidating, if not feel outright blasphemous. And, honestly, to a certain degree, I am part of that problem, because I used to really push, saying yes to gods and accepting their gifts in your life and everything else. And I still, to a large section, will stand behind that stance, except when it comes to your personal sovereignty, your personal decisions, what you do with your body, how you deal with your time. At the end of the day, you've got to live this life. The gods aren't going to live it for you.
Yep. And that's, particularly odious things aside, that was always my biggest issue with your former elders, was that they pretty heavily pushed an idea that you couldn't do that.
Yep.
And like, I'm sorry if this is a subject you don't want to talk, and I will.
No, hit it.
Okay. That's a thing that Galena and Raven, Galena Kreskova and Raven Caldera, for those not familiar, they're real not good about pushing the idea that you can tell gods no. That you're allowed to be your own person. They're pretty big about you must do what they tell you, especially if it costs you. I won't go into more details than that because I don't want to give them more airtime, honestly. But yeah, it's a thing.
It is. And the thing is, like, on the one hand, there is some truth to sometimes the gods will approach you with a challenge to see if you're going to rise to it. There's also the truth of sometimes the challenge is to tell them fucking no.
It is.
And I find, especially if it's a deal where you're going to get this really cool thing. And if you don't ask the question of what is this going to cost, it will be taken out of your ass sooner or later because you've agreed to getting that power. Or you've agreed to X, Y, or Z as a result. And some of that is you got to know your own worth. And some of that is you've got to know your own damn time and your own limitations. Yep. And unfortunately, I have been in situations where I overloaded my ass with too much shit to do.
Yeah.
And I think that excitement and that power around new relationship energy, whether it's with people or with gods, is an active component we don't talk enough about in polytheist and pagan circles, because a lot of folks will come fresh to this and be like, I want to learn everything. And that's great. That's great. I really want to encourage that. And I really want to encourage them to learn more about the basics of how to protect yourself, of how to, yeah, fuck you too. You think? Yeah, just a bit. But I really want to encourage folks, whether you're old or new, especially if you're entering into a new relationship with a god, it can be really easy to be like, I'm really excited about this god, and I really want to know everything about them, and then just kind of agree to shit because you want to maintain and develop a good connection with them. And honestly, like, over the long term of being a heathen since 06, 07, that kind of zeal is great, but you can meet it out over time. You don't have to do everything all at once. And I know that I'm kind of calling us both out on this.
Oh, no, I was going to share a personal story next.
Go for it.
So, as a primal personal example of this, when I first got moving in Pack Magic, before literally anyone else was initiated, when it was just me doing this work, before I even really knew what I was doing, I started initiating. I started working with these spirits, and then very suddenly it was, cool, I'm doing these things. And I didn't ask why. And I didn't ask what it was going to cost. And I didn't know what was, like, genuinely, I didn't know what was going on. And I just did the things, and it was great. And it worked really well, and everything was clicking, and it was wonderful. And then a few months later, I hooked up with an ex of mine, and it was a fun night. And the next day, I was so violently ill, I had to call out of work in the middle of a pandemic. I thought I had COVID. Tested negative, didn't have COVID. It was fine. But I was sick for a week. I was sick as a dog for a week, pun intended. And it was like, that timing is coincidental. I'm going to ignore this. And I mean, it's COVID time, so like it didn't come up again for about a year. And then a year later, been talking to a girl on Tinder, and things are going well. Spend the night at her place on our first date. And before, like, literally that night, all right, phone, calm down. That night, like, I haven't even left her apartment yet, and I am once again sick as a dog. And both of us are then sick for a week. Again, like, can't go to work, think I have COVID, test negative, thankfully, but it was really rough. At which point I'm like, okay, I see the pattern here. And I confirm it several months later that through divination and everything else and looking into it that yes, this is in fact, we'll use the word because it's as close as we're going to get. It doesn't work super well, but it's as close as we're going to get. But it's a taboo. I can't have sex with anyone I want to. I just can't. If I have sex with someone who is incompatible with pack magic, both of us will get sick, violently ill for a week at least. I didn't know that going in. I didn't ask.
Oops.
I was sick for 2 weeks, all told. And I felt like shit. Like,
I think this what
really,
like, amuses me the
like
most is I think that you had asked me a Q&A or topic suggestion for my Patreon about taboos, either as this was hitting or just before.
right as it hit. That was what prompted the question.
Which is fucking hilarious. The thing about taboos is sometimes you find them out well ahead of time because they're part of a living tradition. And then sometimes you find out, whoops, I can't eat that anymore. Or, oops, I can't have that anymore.
No, and Caitlin's told the story on AGF a couple of times about how she found she's got a taboo against almonds. She can't have them. And it's one of those things you gotta, as much as you can, because sometimes you can't, right? Like in an emergency situation, okay, you can't ask. But as much as you can, if you have the opportunity, do your due diligence. I am so glad that I'm in pack magic. It's my favorite fucking thing. I will do this until I die and beyond if I have the chance. But I didn't know what the cost was going to be. Would I have said yes anyway? Yeah, absolutely. I also wouldn't have made those same decisions because I would have known that it was going to make me sick, that it was going to make other people sick. Because that's the other thing. This didn't just cost me. In both cases, the person that I was with also was sick. They paid the price for my mistake. That's not okay.
And this is an important thing to point out about spirit relationships in general, is that it's literally not just about you, because it's not just you taking on taboos potentially. It's your family. It's what is going to be the material impact of your choices on your loved ones, not just family, just loved ones in general. Melkor brings up a really great point. They said, also keep an eye out for seasonal taboos because sometimes they can change. And they're seasonal, and then sometimes you can negotiate within a taboo. So Bear Spirit a long time ago said, I'm going to help you with your diabetes. Here's the deal. You cannot have certain forms of sugar substitutes. And sometimes when we're out and about, or sometimes if I don't know what's in it, I have to negotiate with Bear Spirit in order to have something. Because if we're going to like the movie theater, the only thing they have there is full of bullshit.
Yeah.
And so my deal with Bear Spirit is if we negotiate on it, I owe them so much honey for what amounts to a dispensation. And sometimes you can negotiate that shit with spirits and they're cool with that. And then you get some taboos which are so hard it may as well be a line in the sand.
Yeah.
And then there are some taboos which are like, if you can do it.
Yeah.
Again, like I have a standing agreement with cacao spirits to only eat approved forms of chocolate, and mostly that's to do with is it organic? Is it ones where they're trying to work with the local populace, that kind of thing. So within there is a vulnerability in talking about taboos, which is why I'm giving relatively low level ones, because this is a way you can fuck people over spiritually as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is.
You're welcome.
I got founders all over me. Thanks, Sarenth.
You got backwards basket all over you.
Speaking like literally in the Irish lore, that's how Cuchulainn died.
Yep.
He had strict taboos that he could neither violate hospitality, he could never refuse hospitality, and he could never eat dog. And he got himself into a situation where he was being offered as part of hospitality dog, so he could violate one or the other in it, and the cost was he died.
Yep.
Hey, cat, and I thought the same thing. Siku and his dog meat. Yep, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and this is also like why there is the witch's pyramid catches a lot of shit, but like to be silent is actually a really important one that very few people listen to as part of the witch's pyramid, and more people should, not just because people should shut up and listen, but also because like you don't need to put your shit on blast everywhere.
No,
because it is a really, really, really easy way to fuck somebody hard with doing no effort.
Yep.
I mean, if you think of it like a food allergy, if I know you are allergic to peppers, no one's going to convict me if I accidentally put peppers in your food.
Yep.
So you gotta depending on the next company and what the taboo is, you're gonna want to might keep your mouth shut and not say anything, just to say people have got an allergy.
Yep. We've been talking about taboos for almost a half hour. It's a good topic. It's an important topic, but you know. It's honestly, it's one that doesn't get talked about enough, I feel like.
It doesn't, and I think partly because there's the vulnerability aspect, but also, I'm just going to come right out and say it. A lot of pagans are very anti-establishment, and taboos are establishment.
Yeah.
Like it is establishing that there is an authority, and it might be the god or the spirit in question, and that in order to have access to or this particular aspect of them, you actually have to acquiesce to something.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the y'all can't tell me what to do aspect of a lot of pagan culture kind of shoots itself completely in the foot because they're not prepped for when that shit actually becomes a requirement of interacting with that god.
Right.
Like a classic one is the like you can't eat cow meat
For Hinduism, yeah. Like, yeah. Another one that's been culturally lost by most of European culture over time is there's a cultural taboo that actually there's a whole host of them, and I actually talked about this in the after party no it wasn't the after party, it was the last discussion night on AGF. Regardless, there's a whole host of cultural taboos that have been lost with regards to the wild hunt. Things for how to talk to them if you run into them. Don't take prey from the wild hunt. Don't ask for things from the wild hunt except under certain circumstances. Right? Like,
it also depends on which wild hunt you're running across, because
absolutely,
yeah, Odin's wild hunt is not the same as
right. Frau Hall's wild hunt is very different than Odin's, is very different than one led by Nuada or one of the other Gaelic spirits.
Comes to mind.
Who?
I think Perkta. Didn't she have wild hunt per se, but
yeah. No, Perkta and Hall I syncretize. Other people may or may not. But I'm Merc. Yeah, no, exactly. But like, there's a whole host of taboos associated with the wild hunt of shit you just don't do that we lost, and like the folklore is full of, and then he died.
Yeah, it's almost like taboos matter, and
almost.
This is a good point too. I always find the different reasons behind why taboos happen is interesting. Like, it's easier for the spirit to connect with you if you abstain from something. Like, yeah, that right there.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's like, sometimes it's literally you're marking yourself as different.
Yep.
You're marking yourself as other. Ooh, that's a really good question.
What differentiates between taboos and superstitions?
Okay, I can tell you right off my off the cuff reaction is a taboo is something that's been laid down on you. A superstition is something you do to ward off the possibility of something happening.
Yeah. I would say that superstition is just a broader category than taboo because it can just encompass most taboos.
The purpose of a taboo is categorically different than what a superstition is, though. Superstitions are specifically made out of fear. I would say this is pretty across the board. Like on Superstitio in the I can't recall what the text is now because my brain is just lovely like that. The point that the philosopher is making, talking about the superstitious person, is that they're going to make offerings to every river they cross and every tree that they pass and so on and so forth, so they don't offend, so they don't, da 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 da. And all of this is based in a fear, almost a distrust that the gods or the spirits of this area are going to be understanding. A taboo is something that you obey out of respect. Superstition you engage in out of fear.
Yeah.
That for me is the big dividing line from a motivational standpoint, is that a taboo is adhered to because you respect the god, ancestors, or spirits in question.
That's, as a rough delineation, yeah, I think that works really well. As always, individual.
Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, your mileage may vary. Individual cases are going to be individual cases. Like, we can't cover all of those. You just can't. It's not possible.
Like, the thing is, the problem is that superstitions and taboos are unfortunately really mixed in academic circles in terms of, well, this is a superstition they have around these trees. No. Oftentimes when scholars say this is a superstition around this tree, this plant, this blah, it's because they carry a certain relationship which requires this respect.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's fair. Yeah, because it's very easy for an academic to say, oh, well, they treat the remains of the animals that they hunted with this out of superstition, versus, no, that's a cultural taboo that they've been observing for 1,000 years because the relationship they have with those spirits.
Right. Like, I think okay, so here's actually a really good difference between a taboo and a superstition. Asking forgiveness or thanking an animal when you kill it in a hunt versus continuously making the sign of a cross over an animal you've just killed.
Yeah.
The former respects that you hunted this animal, you killed this animal. The latter is a warding gesture to make sure it doesn't hurt you in spirit form.
Yeah.
Again, I think this has to do with respect versus fear. And some of these taboos, to be sure, are built out of fear.
Well, certainly.
The taboos that were enacted for bear killings, for instance, in Eurasia and Indo-European cultures in general in the ancient world, just the word bear itself is a kind of what some people might point to as a superstition, but we might point to as a taboo.
Yeah.
Because bear in the old Indo-European languages probably translated something to the effect of brown.
At least the one that survived today, because
Right.
We're pretty sure that we lost the word because it became taboo to say it for fear of summoning the thing.
Yep. It's like saying the name of the note deer, which I will not say. The note deer being the evil spirits that tend to flesh shift and shapeshift in local Native American legends.
Yep.
This is a good one.
I see a superstition as something you impose upon yourself, sometimes because you assume an outside force might require it, but you inherently make the choice. Whereas taboo is placed on you from the outside. That gets at a good point. But cultural taboos versus superstitions can become confusing over time, right? And that's kind of the sticking point that I would say, is that remembers being taught not to whistle at night, right? Like, that's kind of the thing. It's like superstition. I don't want to deride superstition and say that it's inherently a bad thing, because a lot of superstitions, or things that we would label as superstitions in this way, are things that will keep you safe. Sarenth, you're muted.
Right.
There we go.
that would be one. Remember not to be taught to whistle at night.
Whistle at night. Because like you know, if you see a deer, are you sure? You sure that was a deer? Okay, let's go inside. Sometimes superstition or passed down taboos. Exactly. Like it gets fuzzy at the edges, as do most things in spirituality, right? It gets fuzzy. There's a lot of overlap. It's complicated. And the fact of the matter is that the human, or at least Western idea of trying to delineate things hardly, especially definitions of things, doesn't work because that's not how language functions. We've been taught that, like, oh yeah, a dictionary tells you what words mean, but it doesn't.
No, it tells you merely how they're being used at this point in time.
And even then, not really.
Right.
It tries to, but it fails universally. Like, it just does.
It's not an authority because it's not the one actually using the fucking language. Like,
exactly.
What is the difference between a taboo and a superstition? Are you engaged in it or not? Sometimes is whether or not it's a taboo or a superstition. It's a taboo if you're engaging in it. It's a superstition if some crazy motherfucker goes around making signs of the crosses at all the abandoned houses.
Exactly. And a lot of it, like you mentioned, there is context. Is it? Well, for me, because I'm part of the in group, it's a taboo. It's a thing that I'm observing. For the out group over there, they're just superstitious. They're just crazy.
Right. Oh man. Honestly, like, so even like something I do is when I pass graveyards, my family and I, we make prayers and we salute. And it's very, very quick. It's a very quick prayer. You know, hail to the dead, hail to the warrior dead, hail to the military dead. Let's do heil. And we go on about our day. That might seem very fucking weird to somebody who's outside. Like, why would you do that? That looks like a superstition. And it's not a superstition. It's not a taboo. It's something we do out of respect for the dead every time we pass a graveyard. And when we pass roadkill, we say, hail to the roadside dead. Hail to the carn eaters, may you be safe. It depends on how much time we've got. If there's a whole boatload of dead roadkill on the road, we'll say, hail to all the dead of this road. Hail to all the carn eaters, may you be safe. Let's do heil. And we go along with our drive. Because sometimes when you're on US 23 or I-75, it takes an awful long time to get to where you're going to get to, and you don't want to have to stop every 5 seconds and say a prayer.
Yep.
And it could look really superstitious if we were to say that prayer every 5 seconds, because sometimes that's how often the roadkill shows up.
Yeah, no, if you're in the height of fucking rut season and it's rural Michigan, you might see deer that often. It's fine. And this is why we should have more native wolf populations, but that's beside the point.
Stop fucking hunting them, you chodes.
Right. Sometimes, yeah.
I might have highlighted that earlier, but I think it's worth repeating. Like, some superstitions are passed down taboos, and some taboos are merely passed down superstitions.
Yep.
Like, I think the thing for me, what really delineates the two is, can I explain why this is a thing?
Yeah.
Like, really, at the end of the day, like, if I can explain why we have a taboo, that's a taboo. Oh, we just do that, and there's zero explanation. Like, it's not protective, it's not warding, it's just something we do. And sometimes that's just part of culture, and that is okay. It's not inherently a bad thing to have superstitions. Because, like, you have people who are completely anti-theist who will talk to their computers and will say to you with a straight face, I don't believe in any gods, any spirits, any ancestors, but we'll have dialogue with their computers like it's a living person and say, she's feeling rough today, or he's feeling grumpy today, or they're feeling blah. And it's like, you're literally talking about an inanimate object. You're claiming there's no personhood in this thing, and yet.
Yep. Emily makes a great point here. This is part of why I want you on the show. I tend to think of superstitions as taboos where the initial reasoning or bestowing of the taboo may have been forgotten, though people discredit others' taboos by calling them superstitions. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we've been talking about. Like, yeah, no, that's a good point.
Your taboos become my superstitions when it's politically convenient.
Yep. And discounting the power of interpersonal power in politics, because politics is just interpersonal power, on culture and the way that taboos and superstitions are understood is, quite frankly, a disservice to everything. Like, it's important. It's a major player in all of this.
This also plays back into our earlier points about God spousery, about spirit relationships and all that. Because if you're not on the inside, a lot of what we're talking about sounds absolutely fucking bonkers to the overculture.
Yep.
I mean, there's a reason that God spouses continuously look to the example of Catholic nuns as a normalizing influence on talking about what otherwise seems like to the overculture a bonkers way of relating to the gods.
Yep.
And it's also really, I think, it speaks to the nascent embarrassment that a lot of pagans have toward theism, because if indeed we do believe that there are a multitude of gods, even if you're a duotheist, like if you are a strict Wiccanate duotheist and you believe that all the goddesses are aspect of one goddess and all the gods are aspect of one god and they are all these multitudes are contained in the Godhead, that means there's an infinite variety of relationships and understandings that we can have to Godhead.
Yep.
And that the only thing holding you back from appreciating that this person is a different relationship to Godhead than you is embarrassment.
Yeah. Yeah. This actually was brought up on Skitsbothnia earlier today, is a lot of times when talking about personal gnosis and personal understandings in relationship with the gods, we run into problems. Yeah, go ahead. Emily says, I have no problems being on, though once I'm imbibing, such as now, getting me to be quiet. Getting me to quiet down might be the challenge. Emily, that's kind of the point of having a guest.
Yes, that is kind of the point of all these episodes.
Yeah, like we're literally ranting for fun and profit. But so the idea was brought up on Skitsbothnia of, right, so multiple understandings of a single goddess, in this case Skathi, were brought up because some people were identifying her as demisexual. Some people were saying that they relate to her more as a asexual icon. Some people were like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like, no, I see her as completely heterosexual and sexually normative. And some people were saying, why are we assigning sexual values to the gods who literally don't have a body? Like, that only makes sense in context. That you can't do that. Like, it doesn't make sense. And the thing is, all of them were right.
And all of them were wrong.
Exactly. Right. All of them were right for their particular relationship. And all of them were wrong for overarching relationships, because that's the thing, is it's multitudinous. It's all of you are right.
You mean there's a carry-on bag to go with the latent monotheist suitcase? Yeah. It turns out that the overculture that you get all of your information on what sex, sexuality, and gender looks like comes with its own carry-on baggage. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, turns out. But yeah, it was this really, and someone said basically that, it really hampers pagan dialogue on experience of the gods when we assume that our way is correct, or the only way, or not correct, but the only correct way.
Yes.
And that's the thing. Like, I can be correct and completely contradict your experience, and both can be correct at the same time.
Yes, that. Because it's not incorrect to say that Loki is a god. It's also not incorrect to say that Loki is a goddess. It's also not incorrect to say that Loki is cis. It's also not incorrect to say that Loki is trans, although a personal experience being what it is. I'm going to be more in the Loki is androgynous, non-binary, trans than strictly cis. But again, there's nothing wrong if you only ever experience Loki as a god with a G, with a he behind that implied god, instead of being the gender neutral term that it generally is. That is correct for you.
Right.
That is, to borrow a phrase from, I believe it's African traditional religion has this kind of idea. Like, that is my Papa Legba. Like, that is my, and they specify my experience, my understanding, my dialogue with, my Odu with
that God or spirit. Yeah.
That God or spirit. Yeah. And so your experiences are correct and valid. and I really need to emphasize this, that your experiences are correct and valid, but that doesn't invalidate anybody else's experience with that God or that spirit. And this is where getting into discernment with people gets really tricky, because they'll say, well, that doesn't sound like Odin because it's not in the sources. It doesn't sound like Odin because that's not my experience of Odin. If you've only ever experienced Odin as he, you are going to not understand Odin as they, Odin as she, Odin as beyond or inclusive of all genders.
Right.
And that's just a small aspect of them, of who he, they, she are.
Yeah. Yeah. No, genuinely. And even deities that we tend to think of as hyper masculine, say Thor. We have a myth where Thor is not just dressing as Freya, but is perceived by everyone around him as female.
And yet we're still, even in the context of this myth, we are still using he, him pronouns. He doesn't lose his masculinity just because his outward expression of gender changes to the point where everybody around him treats him as a woman, as female.
So, gender is a social construct and also is fake.
I think this honestly gets down to like why treating gender and a lot of these outward expressions as performative is so powerful and important.
It really is. It is. And it's a social construct. That's a fact. Gender is a social construct.
It's not wrong to only experience a deity in a certain way, but it's always helpful to realize they might be experienced differently by others. Yes.
It's
like that aha moment you discover your primary school teacher is a life outside of school. Yes, that.
Really. No, that's kind of the perfect metaphor for it. Like, yes. This dives into, we are past an hour. We don't have time for me to get off on this rant. Maybe I will when we're in the after party. That's beside the point. The whole thing of gods as roles that they play in our lives, right? Who Loki is to me is not necessarily who he is to you. It's a different role that we're playing in each other's lives, and that's fine. That doesn't mean that role can't change.
We experience this with blood relatives in our everyday life.
Yep.
I am sure you've had that one uncle or that one aunt who seemed really blah, and then in their personal life is opposite. That uncle is such a dick, but he donates his time to Meals on Wheels or something. And you're like, oh, he's just grumpy because he gets to experience the grind of seeing what society does every day. And he's just bitter about it. Or maybe, you've got this aunt who seems sweet as pie, but she's talking mad shit about everybody in the church behind their backs.
Yep.
You are not one person to everybody. You can't be. How much more true is that for gods who interact with literally thousands, millions of beings? I mean, we're just talking about us humans here on Earth. We're not sure if Thor's talking to somebody a couple of planets over. We don't know.
Yep.
It honestly, like, that's a whole rabbit hole I don't even care to go down, because that way lies madness. But we don't know. And if I am not the most important or the only person in this universe, and I am certainly not the only or most important person in this universe, that means that my God is only that way to and with me, in relationship and my understanding with me. That opens up, this is why polycentricity is so important to polytheism. That is, many truths for many gods, even if it's the same God. Like, this is why this is such a needed concept.
One thing I want to cover before we end, because we're approaching an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Turns out when we get ranting, we go off. That doesn't make this lesser. In my opinion, it makes it greater.
Yes.
How much more beautiful is a singular truth for the fact that it is singular and specific and unique? My experience with a God is mine and mine alone, or ours and ours alone. No one else shares that unique, specific relationship. There might be similar, they might be close, but they're not the same. Um, Sarenth and I share a not too dissimilar relationship with Odin, but it's not the same.
Right.
And that makes it unique and beautiful. And that's not because it's not objective, it's all the more beautiful to my mind.
I think objectivity is overrated. I really do.
It
like
is.
because we experience the process of basic learning. I did not experience how to say A the same way that my daughter did, the same way that my son did, the same way that my wife did. We might have had a standardized education. And for let's say, for sake of argument, we all have the exact same education, the exact same teacher somehow, with the exact same set of rules and the exact same linguistics, blah, 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 blah. We are never, ever going to learn the same way. It doesn't matter how close we are in terms of learning aptitude, ability, privilege, etc. I am never going to be able to set my foot in that same river twice, and my experience of that river can never be their experience of that river.
Yep.
How much more true for simply learning our ABCs than gods, ancestors, spirits?
Exactly. You actually get this with music historians as well. They will lament over the fact that they will never hear the same music that Beethoven did because the air is different.
Yep.
There is different things in the air, down to minute chemical compositions, but frankly, the human ear can hear that sometimes.
Well, not
The
only
same
that.
exact violin will play differently because the air is different.
Yep. I was hoping you could pick up on that, yes. And so if this is true of our physical flesh and blood, we can experience this with our eyes, hands, and ears and everything else. If this is true of our flesh and blood reality, that even anti-theists can say, yep, nah, that really sucks. That's very different. How much more true of our raw experiences of God's ancestors, spirits, hell, even our inner lives. Because your inner landscape, like you might know what these runes are, but your experience of, say, Tivas, Hagalas, Fehu might be completely different from mine, despite the fact that you've memorized the same rune poems that I have, and that your experience of Hagalas might be titanically different. And I use that phrase with no small amount of tongue in cheek. It might be titanically different than mine, and it might impact your understanding of a reading so dramatically different that you get an entirely different message. And yes, this is very true. Those runes are morning coffee. This is an in-joke for anybody that follows me on the AGF Discord. My daughter will occasionally, when we go out to eat, she will come over, especially for breakfast, and she'll be sitting next to me, especially if it's a daddy-daughter date thing. And she will take runes off my skin and pluck them in the water, and those will be my 3 runes for the day. Mm-hmm. And honestly, even that experience that I have is so unique to my daughter and I. I've never heard anybody else talk about their kid plucking runes and putting them in coffee. That is a different relationship that I have to the runes that nobody else can match.
Yep.
And that is so powerful and important, because it's not just the personal aspect of my experience, but the continuous relationship. What we're talking about are not static TCP IP. You're either connected to the internet or you're not.
Yep.
We're talking about living relationships.
Yep. How much different is my relationship with Thurisaz, whose poem says, in part, husband of the giantess? How much different is my relationship with that rune than someone else whose relationships with Jotun is entirely antagonistic?
Right. Yeah. It's funny you bring this up, because right now I'm working with the younger Futhark. So I worked with the elder Futhark since I became a heathen. And now I'm diving into working with a younger Futhark. And it is different. It is very different. Despite knowing the rune poems, I still take a lot of influence from the Anglo-Saxon rune poems and how I understand the elder Futhark. I kind of take them hand in hand in whichever rune poem happens to really pop up and work. tends to be the one I go with. So like Kanaz is very different from Kaun.
Mm-hmm.
Kanaz is the torch and also possibly ulcer. Kaun is straight up, this shit's gonna kill you. Like Kaun is ulcer. It's very direct, very different.
Yeah.
There's no torch here. It's just ulcer.
Yeah, that's a wee bit different. No, and that makes a difference. All right.
Yeah, we should probably start to call it an episode.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you folks showing up and listening to us ramble about taboos and spirits and gods. As always, it's been episode 26. It is really good to be back.
It is. I'm really glad to have you back on the show. We will see y'all next time. For those on the Discord, we will be in the Discord voice chat shortly.
I want to show this really quick because this is an important aspect.
Yep.
Because while we develop our relationships with the gods, ancestors, and spirits, those relationships we carry have knock-on effects for whether you have kids or not. It also has knock-on effects for your community.
Mm-hmm. As yourself for your daughter. We will see y'all on the after party if you're there. If you're not, that's okay. We will catch you next time. It's been a blast. Glad to see everyone again. Take care. Be safe. Get vaccinated. All of that. Love y'all. And see you next time.
All right.